Could, should, and will Jonathan Marchessault be the Rangers' top target in free agency? Is there any chance that Alex Wennberg re-signs with the Rangers? And who could the Rangers look to target with the number 30 overall pick?
You're Locked on the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 1095 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube, and we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. And with that said, we're going to go ahead and dive into the first in a series of several episodes leading up to the start of free agency in the NHL, where we ID, one or multiple free agent targets that the Rangers could look to pursue. And there's one that has been bandied about quite a bit, among Ranger fans, and it seems to be on the rumor mill, and that is Jonathan Marchessault, 33-year-old impending UFA from the Vegas Golden Knights. He seems to be pretty high on the wish list for a lot of fans of the New York Rangers, and it's pretty easy to see why. There's a lot of things to like here. To begin with, just an excellent, all-around, proven NHL player. The guy puts up big-time numbers every single season. He's a proven winner. He can shoot. He can pass. And he would fill a big void on the Rangers, namely the top-line right wing spot, which has just been a revolving door of third line quality players trying to fit in on that top line with Mika and Kreider. And obviously they haven't been able to stick on any single player. Jonathan Marchessault would be that guy. Now, Marchessault does have position versatility. He can and has played all three positions, left wing, right wing, center in his career throughout the various stops that he's had, most notably the last, 7 years with the Vegas Golden Knights. He ended this past season playing right wing on the Knights top line with Tomas Hertl and Jack Eichel. And, if you bring in Jonathan Marchessault at the price that he'll command, yeah, he can play anywhere. You can move him around the lineup if you want to. And like I said, he can play all three of the forward positions. But to me, you bring in Jonathan Marchessault at, again, the price that it would cost, and he would be earmarked for that top line right wing spot with Mika Zibanejad and Chris Kreider. You could always do something a little bit different. You could throw Alexis Lafreniere with Mika and Kreider. That's something that we've discussed, briefly over the last handful of episodes as far as how the Rangers will line up next season. And you could put Marchessault with Trocheck or Panarin. I mean, you've got some options there, but for sure he'd be in the top six. And I think, again, the smart money would be on him landing with Kreider and Mika Zibanejad. It also looks like he mostly played the second power play unit for the Vegas Golden Knights. I think he's somebody that's certainly capable of playing the top unit. But, obviously the Knights have a lot of good players, and he was on the second unit. And I think he'd probably be in the same spot with the New York Rangers. There's a lot of people wanting to replace one of the current 5 players that play on the top power play unit for the Rangers. They want to replace him with Alexis Lafreniere, whether that's Mika, whether that's Trocheck, maybe even Kreider, who knows. There's a lot of people kind of campaigning for that. So if you bring Jonathan Marchessault, yeah, he'd probably be one of the odd men out, and he'd be on the second power play unit rather than the first. But obviously he can strengthen you there in that area of the game. And something that a lot of Ranger fans have pointed out, and I'll point it out right here, right now as well, is that this guy is a proven playoff performer. He has played in 102 career Stanley Cup playoff games. So obviously there's a lot of experience there. He's been a part of some very deep runs, mostly with the Vegas Golden Knights, and obviously won the Stanley Cup, just last season. And in those 102 playoff games that he has competed in, Marchessault has 36 goals and 40 assists. So you're looking at a total of 76 points in 102 career playoff games. He also, the year that the Knights won the Stanley Cup, he was the winner of the Conn Smythe Trophy, which goes to essentially the most valuable player of the Stanley Cup playoffs. That was indeed Marchessault that year. He scored an NHL high 13 playoff goals during that run to the Cup for the Knights. He also had 12 assists, and he also had 25 points. And as I mentioned, the guy's an absolute sniper, can really shoot the puck 42 goals this past season, and Marchessault has not had fewer than 28 goals in any of the last 3 seasons. The 2 seasons before that, they were both shortened by the pandemic, and that being the case, his goal total wasn't as high, but as far as goals per game, he was scoring at roughly the same clip that he has over the past 3 seasons. And we mentioned Mika and Kreider a second ago. Something else I got to throw out there regarding them and his likely placement on their line if he was to sign with the New York Rangers is that when you look at everything that's happened with Mika and Kreider in the, we'll call it the post-Buchnevich era, obviously they had a lot of chemistry with him, and those three worked very well together. But when you look at all the different right wingers that have cycled on and off of that line over the last handful of seasons with Mika and with Kreider, the guy with whom they had the most success was undoubtedly Frank Vatrano. I shouldn't say undoubtedly, but I think you can make a pretty strong case that it worked better with him than anybody else that they've had there over the last handful of seasons here. Well, what does Vatrano have in common with Jonathan Marchessault? They both shoot the puck. It's bombs away, and they can both snipe. And obviously, that worked in the past with Vatrano. Maybe it works in the present with Jonathan Marchessault if he was to sign with the New York Rangers. Now, as far as a reason why certain Ranger fans might be out on Jonathan Marchessault, why they're not really feeling this move, aside from just the cost. We're also salary cap conscious, and that you bring in a player like Jonathan Marchessault, it's not going to come cheap. But besides that, one thing that you could point at as maybe, gives you some pause is the fact that he is 5'9", 183 pounds. So not the biggest player, not the most physical player in the world either. So I do understand some reservations from Ranger fans that might want to see them bring in a top line winger that can, go into the corners and do some of the dirty work. I get that. But one thing I'll say to counter that and why I'm still interested in Marchessault despite the lack of size is the playoff performance. As I mentioned earlier, he's been an absolute beast in the playoffs, won the Conn Smythe a couple of years ago, does seem to produce, and his size or lack thereof has never really seemed to be a detriment to him in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Because when you look at what he's done in the regular season versus what he's done in the playoffs, his scoring is almost identical. In the playoffs, he's basically right at 3/4 of a point per game. It comes out to 0.75 or, rounding off, it gets you there to 0.75 points per game. In the regular season, Marchessault is at 0.76 points per game. So it's almost identical. And whatever he does in the regular season, it seems to work in the playoffs as well. And if it was a small sample size, I might still have some reservations about, he is smaller. Can he get it done in the playoffs? You know what? There's a lot of evidence that basically proves that he can indeed get it done in the playoffs. So that limits whatever reservations I might have there, the lack of size and just the nature of hockey when it comes to the playoffs. As far as what a contract could look like for Marchessault, you got some options here, and I prefer one of two extremes. I'm going to explain what I mean by that. So the one option, the first option, and frankly, the one that's less likely to happen because it's going to be a tough sell for Jonathan Marchessault, is you overpay Jonathan Marchessault, but you do it for only one season. The reason why this would make sense from the Ranger perspective is something that we've talked about, quite a bit on here. The fact that, again, Igor Shesterkin and Alexei Lafreniere next season will need new contracts. They're both going to get a significant bump in pay. You can throw K'Andre Miller into there as well, if you assume that he's still going to be a Ranger at that time. So that's when contracts are really going to go up on this team, and the Rangers are going to have a tough time with the salary cap that season. So if you only sign Jonathan Marchessault to a one-year deal, you can avoid that problem altogether. If you want to bring in Jonathan Marchessault for 1 year at $7 or $8 million, would that get it done? Probably not, because most players, when they hit free agency, they're looking for some length. There are some exceptions to that rule, and I'll throw out a couple of examples for you guys. A couple of years ago, back in 2020, 2021, Taylor Hall was an unrestricted free agent, one of the most coveted free agents on the market that offseason, and he ends up signing a one-year deal worth $8 million with the Buffalo Sabres, and they did not contend, and they traded him to the Bruins at the trade deadline. He signed an extension there, and I was with them for a couple of years. But the bottom line, there is precedence for this where a player doesn't like some of the multi-year offers that he's getting and thinks that the average annual value should be higher, and so they'll say, okay, you know what, I'll just sign a one-year deal for cheap. I'll reestablish my value. I'll get a whole bunch of money for 1 year, more than I'll get, if I sign a multi-year deal, at least, in terms of average annual value. So Taylor Hall was one example of that. And our old friend Vladimir Tarasenko is another. This past offseason, he lingered in free agency for quite a while, didn't seem to be, getting the offers that he would have liked. There were rumors that the Canes were on him. There were even rumors that he was about to sign with the Canes. He didn't do that. He signs for just 1 year and the high average annual value of $5 million with the Ottawa Senators. And then, of course, he was subsequently traded to the Panthers. But again, if you're the Rangers, the reason why this makes sense is you once again avoid Marchessault's contract overlapping with new deals for Lafreniere, for Igor, and for possibly K'Andre Miller as well. And you push all your chips in for this upcoming season, and you say, we're all in. This might be the missing piece. This might be the guy that gets us over the hump and gets us to a Stanley Cup championship. The other extreme option, and this one seems quite a bit more likely, if the Rangers were to bring in Jonathan Marchessault, is you actually go in completely the opposite direction. You go with a long contract, and you do it at a lesser average annual value. It's basically the same thing that the Rangers did with Vincent Trocheck a couple of off seasons ago. He signs for 7 years at $5.625 million a season. But by offering more years, what you do is there's give and take with every negotiation, right? And if you sign somebody for a long time, they'll probably be willing to take a little bit less money per season because they know that the total amount is going to be, significantly high. So you could do something similar for Jonathan Marchessault. Now, he is 33 years old, and that's one of the differences. I believe Trocheck was either 28 or 29 when he signed with the Rangers. Marchessault is 33. He'll be 34 in December, so you got to be careful here. You can't really overdo it. But what you could do is maybe you go for like 6 years at about $5 million. Now, of course, that does mean that he's going to be, on the older side. He's going to be into his late 30s by the time that contract ends. But the one thing that does, again, is it keeps your average annual value down for Jonathan Marchessault. It allows you to do some other things in free agency, whether it's re-signing your own guys, whether it's going out and getting somebody else. And you kind of just bite the bullet. You accept the fact that if you sign Jonathan Marchessault for 6 years, the last 2 years, that contract may not be looking so good. He may not be the player that he is now. I mean, if we're being honest, he won't be the same player that he is now. But by doing that, you stay aggressive and you keep attacking this championship window that is going to be open at least for next year. Probably the year after that, Panarin will still be under contract, and hopefully these guys aren't slowing down too much by then. Trocheck will still be around, players like that. Lafreniere, I mean, he's going to be one of the best players in the league. That's certainly possible. So that's an option as well. And one more fun fact about Jonathan Marchessault here before we move on. He was undrafted back in 2011. He signed a contract with the Connecticut Whale, which was the Rangers AHL affiliate that predated the Hartford Wolfpack. And he ended up that season only 1 year with the Connecticut Whale, 64 points in 76 games. He signed with the Columbus Blue Jackets not too long after that. So, hey, bring him home, right? Bring everything full circle. Bring Jonathan Marchessault back to the Rangers organization. I don't know how high or how low he'll be on my wish list, after we kind of do a deep dive on all these other UFAs and all these other options for the Rangers. But there is a lot to like about Jonathan Marchessault, and I'd be surprised if the Rangers aren't at least in on him, if they're not at least, going to make some calls, have some conversations with him, and see if they can make something happen. Because he does check a lot of boxes and just a heck of a player. So, yeah, somebody that's going to be pretty high on my wish list and probably for you guys as well. I'm sure there'll be some people that don't want Marchessault, but I would expect nothing less. We're Ranger fans. It's a passionate bunch, and I don't think you'll ever have Ranger fans 100% agree on really anything. So it's all good. Let me know if you've got a favorite UFA target. I'll talk about that player in the next episode. We're going to keep everything rolling in just a second. I want to shift our attention to an in-house UFA for the Rangers. That is Alex Wennberg, and we will do that in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Policygenius. A lot of life is unpredictable, but a good life insurance plan gives your family a financial safety net to protect against some of the unknowns. Policygenius is the country's leading online insurance marketplace. It makes choosing the right policy for your family quick and easy. With Policygenius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year for $1 million of coverage. Some options are 100% online and let you avoid unnecessary medical exams. Policygenius helps you easily compare your options from America's top insurers in just a few clicks. Their award-winning agents can even walk you through the process step by step. Get peace of mind by finding the right life insurance with Policygenius. Head to policygenius.com or click the link in the description to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That is policygenius.com. All right, we just want to take a minute to thank everybody, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. And for the everydayers, thank you guys as always. We're going to, throughout the week, have more free agency talk, more draft talk. Draft is right around the corner here. So is free agency, for that matter. And also, I still have a couple of in-house free agents that we need to discuss for the Rangers, including this one, Alex Wennberg, and just the idea of if he's going to be back with the Rangers. The short answer is no. I really don't see that happening. Alex Wennberg, for anybody that needs a refresher, comes over at the trade deadline from Seattle in exchange for a second-round draft pick for this year, and then also a conditional fourth-round pick in 2025. That pick could have upgraded to a third-rounder, but because Nils Lundkvist didn't do enough with the Dallas Stars, it's a long story. That draft pick remains a fourth-rounder. So at the time, it felt a bit high, and honestly, it still kind of feels a little bit high. I just, he does some good things. Wennberg does some good things. He is a good defensive forward and stepped into that third-line center role, but I don't know that he's the guy for the Rangers. I do think the Rangers are certainly going to be in the market for a center, in particular, somebody that they feel can come in and center the third line. I know that Filip Chytil is an option, but we just don't know what's going to be next for Filip Chytil. His health and safety, that has to come first and foremost. And I'd love to see him make a full recovery and go on to have an awesome career, preferably with the Rangers, but we just don't know. Nobody knows for sure. And with him being that much of a question mark, I mean, I guess in theory, you could say that maybe that cracks a door open for Alex Wennberg to return, but I just don't think that's going to happen. I think they're going to go in a different direction as far as who that they would be looking for a third line center and somebody that can step into that role if Filip Chytil is unavailable. Bottom line, you need some offense from your third line center, and Wennberg provided basically none of it during his time with the Rangers, and he's not known as like an offensive forward in the first place. And you've also got to remember, whoever centers the Ranger third line next season, there's a good chance he's going to be out there with some guys that, some young players that the Rangers want to get going early. Brent Othman, I think there's a very good chance you could see him make the Rangers out of training camp this upcoming season, just the same way that Will Cooley did this past offseason. Brett Berard, I mean, he's kind of been my dark horse prospect for the Rangers for a while, and people are starting to take notice of him. He could make the team out of camp, and even if he doesn't, he'll be up at a certain point, you would think. It's at least possible. I don't know. I mean, do you really want like Alex Wennberg centering that line? And it's nothing against Wennberg. It's not like he doesn't do some good things, but I just want a center with a little bit more offensive prowess, especially when it comes to playing on the same line as a Berard, as an Othman. Maybe Sikora, although he's only 19. I don't know that they would rush him that quickly, but he's possible. Maybe even Kakko. If Kakko is still here, you're trying to get this guy going finally at some point, get a little bit more offense out of Kakko. Wennberg and Kakko can lock things down defensively together, but as far as offense, I just don't think you're going to get a whole lot of it. And like I said, I just think there are probably better options out there, some of whom we'll certainly discuss as we go forward, talk about free agent targets for the New York Rangers. And again, give Wennberg some credit. He came over. He was good on the penalty kill. The third line in general was good defensively. Gives you a little bit more depth than the Rangers otherwise would have had, by adding Alex Wennberg to the mix. Of course, that big Game 3 overtime winner against the Florida Panthers, that was a cool moment as well. But again, 19 games with the Rangers, 1 goal, 4 assists, and he was actually a -1 in that time. That's in the regular season. You put together the playoffs, 16 games, 2 points, 1 goal and 1 assist. Guy got 2 goals in 35 games with the Rangers. Like, you just need a little bit more out of your third line center than that. And, history would tell us that you can't really expect that from Alex Wennberg. He has not had more than 38 points in a season since 2016, 2017. So just not a guy with a lot of offensive prowess. I mentioned Chytil a minute ago, and I don't want to go on too much of a tangent here, but whatever. Let's just do it anyway. So Filip Chytil, a couple people have been throwing out the idea of possibly trading him, and I just really highly doubt that that's going to happen because a couple of reasons. I mean, the concussion history, no team is going to take that risk bringing him in, which sounds a little bit cold, but it's the truth. We just don't know what the future holds for Filip Chytil, and neither does any team that would pick him up in a trade. And if any team did want to pick up Chytil in a trade, then they would offer the Rangers so little for him that it's probably not even worth it for the Rangers. You're better off just hanging on to Chytil and seeing what he can produce in the future. And you just keep your fingers crossed that he can get beyond the concussion history and be the player that it looked like he was going to be, before he ended up missing all of most of last season. He got back for the playoffs. The only conceivable way I could see Chytil getting traded is if it's just a straight salary dump by the Rangers. And I just don't think they would do that. because they're not going to get anything back for him, nothing significant because of the injury history. But I think Filipino, the way things stand, is your third line center next year. I think Alex Wennberg probably walks, but if you're the Rangers, probably a good idea to bring in a center that you feel is capable of anchoring that third line there, because you just don't know what's going to happen with Filipino. And as far as Wennberg goes, I mean, he could be that guy, but he's just not the top option for me. And I get the feeling he's not going to be the top option for the Rangers either. Wennberg, this is going to be somewhat hard to believe, but over the past 3 seasons, he's had a contract that has paid him $4.5 million per season. The Rangers are not going to go anywhere near that number, especially considering some of the other in-house moves that they'd like to make, some of the out-house moves that they'd like to make. I'd like just mention Jonathan Marchessault. I mean, do you really want to bring back Alex Wennberg and not be able to sign somebody like Jonathan Marchessault? Probably not. So that being the case, yeah, I don't see any real path to Alex Wennberg returning to this team. It'd be par for the course. We know that Drury, when he brings in rentals, he tends to let them walk in free agency. I would give Wennberg a better chance of being back than, say, like Roslovic. I would give him a better chance of being back than Wennberg, or he is Wennberg. Who am I talking about? Wheeler and Roslovic. I'd put Wennberg ahead of both of them. But yeah, I just don't see that being a priority. And as far as like a percentage, I can't go any higher than like 10% at the highest as far as Alex Wennberg being back. Never say never, but I just feel like the Rangers are going to need that money elsewhere, and they will ultimately spend that money elsewhere. So going to keep everything rolling in just a second, shift our attention back to the NHL draft. We took a look at a handful of draft prospects in a recent episode, and we got one more for you guys here today, and we will do that in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel. Summertime means baseball and more, and you can bet it all on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 you can use to bet everything from the Finals MVP to who is going to hit one out of the ballpark. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and add a big win to your summer bucket list. FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. All right, we'll go ahead and keep everything rolling here. Like I said, I thought it would be a good time to talk about another draft prospect for the New York Rangers and somebody that they could pick possibly at number 30 overall, which is, of course, when the Rangers will select in the first round. And then after that, it's going to be a while before they pick. They have a first-round pick, a fourth-round pick, and a sixth-round pick. And like I said in a recent episode, right before the draft, I'm going to do at least one draft simulation on here. Going to have to do some serious homework to find out about players that are available in the fourth round, the fifth round, the sixth round. But we will do that. It's always a lot of fun. We do that every season. And for the time being, though, I think it'd be better to look at who the Rangers could take at number 30. And as I mentioned, we talked about a couple of other prospects in a recent episode. You can go back if you search "The Rangers Are on the Clock." That was the title. You type that in, it'll come up for you. We discussed center Cole Baudouin. I probably mess up that pronunciation, but you get the idea. Center Dean Letourneau, there we go, and defenseman Charlie Elick. And today we're going to take a look at another defenseman, and that is going to be Leo Salin Wallenius. So that's who we're going to go with today. Just a well-rounded defenseman. He's not the biggest defenseman available in the draft. He certainly wouldn't be the biggest defenseman in the NHL. He is 6 feet tall, 183 pounds. And if you want like a basis of comparison, that's a very similar build to Ryan Lindgren. It's the same height, a couple of pounds lighter, I want to say. So not the biggest defenseman in the world. We know that. I know that'll right away give people some hesitation, some pause, and I understand where you're coming from. What I do like about him, though, is he just seems like one of those defensemen that doesn't have really a whole lot of holes in his game, if really any holes in his game. Just seems like a very well-rounded player, one of the more well-rounded players available in the draft. By all accounts, going by everything I've read about him, he does well against the forecheck. He can hold up well. And we saw the Rangers, how much they struggle with the Panthers forecheck. And not that like he would jump right into the NHL and help them in that area, but to get somebody like that in the pipeline would probably be a good thing. By all accounts, he's also a good puck-moving defenseman, something else that the Rangers somewhat lack on their current roster right now. And seems to be very good at getting the puck out of his zone. And those are three things that the Rangers seem to be lacking, certainly in the Eastern Conference Final against the Panthers. He is also said to be an excellent skater. you hear this with forwards quite a bit. I mean, you'll hear it with defensemen from time to time, but you think of like the best skaters in the NHL, you're usually thinking about forwards. But apparently, he is said to be one of the best skaters in the entire draft. Great vision, great instincts on the ice as well. Somebody who just projects, like I said, is a well-rounded defenseman, a very solid two-way defenseman. Seems to be a relatively safe pick. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Braden Schneider a few years ago, because the consensus there was that he was one of the safer picks that you could make in that year's draft. And I'm getting sort of a similar vibe here, just based on everything that I've read about Salen Wallenius. And again, if the pronunciation isn't perfect, I apologize. But whenever Sam Rosen calls his name, that's what I'll go with from that point on. But as far as weaknesses, apparently there are times where he holds the puck too long and just takes too long to make a decision with it, whether he wants to pass, whether he wants to shoot, and that can cost him at times. Apparently his shot is not really anything special, and he could also stand to be a little bit more physical. And again, I know people are going to hear that, and there's going to be some Ranger fans that are immediately out on that. But again, you're picking at number 30. You're not getting like a franchise-changing defenseman at that point in the draft. There really aren't any of those kind of defensemen that seem to be available in this year's draft in general. But there are some guys that can come in and, fill a role and potentially be, a top 4 defenseman on an NHL team. And I think he's one of them. Something else for another frame of reference here. I've been talking whenever we discuss draft prospects about the mock draft that we did. All of us Locked On NHL hosts, basically there was a Excel spreadsheet that we all shared, and every team was listed there, and everybody in order of the draft filled out whichever player they would like to select with their pick. And when it got to me, I went with Dean Latorno, but that was in part only because Cole Beaudoin went to the Predators at number 22 overall. But as for Salen Wallenius, he went undrafted in our Locked On NHL mock draft, so nobody took him. It's not too surprising, though. Most of the mock drafts that I'm reading, most of the rankings that I'm looking at, they have him going, for the most part, either very late in the first round or early to mid second round. And there's a couple of dissenters that actually don't have him going until late in the third round. But of the 15 publications that I'm looking at that I have right in front of me right now, he's listed as high as number 29 and as low as number 67. But again, the general consensus, most of the people, doing these rankings, doing these mock drafts, have him going late in the first round, early to mid second round. So if you're the Raiders, I mean, that could open up a possibility if this is your guy where maybe you can trade down and add a couple of draft picks for a little bit later in the draft. It's always risky, because if this is really your guy and you don't get him, then you're going to be, upset with yourself because you had the pick right there and you traded down. But it's one of those things where if they like him, but they don't love him, then maybe you can take that risk. Maybe there's some other players that they think are comparable that they can get a few picks later if they trade down. It's an option, but Rangers have to get it right with this pick. Whatever they do with it, whether it involves trading up, trading down, whatever it might be, the Rangers have this first round draft pick, and then they don't pick again until the 4th round. So that makes it, I mean, it's always important. You always want to knock it out of the ballpark with all your draft picks, but especially your first rounder. But it's even more important now because they don't have a second rounder. They don't have a third rounder. So they got to get it right, and they got to find the right player for them when they are on the clock. But to keep everything rolling and talk a little bit more here about Salen Wallenius. So I wanted to go through some of his stats. He was playing on the Jedin J20 national team, 43 games there, 11 goals, 31 assists, so 42 points in 43 games. I realize numbers that he puts up in a league like that are not going to translate directly to the NHL, but it does go to show that clearly he's got some offense to his game as well. He was also a plus 20 during that season. And he also played for Sweden's under 18 international junior team, 28 games, 9 goals, 16 assists, 25 points, and a plus 16 in that time. And I tend to also, I like to read a couple of scouting reports anytime we talk about some of these prospects, because these are people that do this for a living and they tend to be very, very good at it. So I'll read a couple of those for you guys here as well. This one comes to us from the Elite Prospects 2024 NHL Draft Guide. Salen Wallenius is a sound puck distributor and in-zone defender. His defensive skating allows him to match speed in space with ease, contain opponents, and get stops along the wall. Constant scanning allows him to disrupt potential scoring plays as they develop. With the puck, he can easily avoid forechecking pressure and generate exits and entries at pace. We've also got one from our own Haiti I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but he does the Locked On NHL Prospects show. Does an awesome job there. I even jumped on with him, in an episode a while back, and he also writes for Dobber Prospects. This is what he had to say. Salen Wallenius is a skilled and mobile offensive defenseman who has made his mark this season by getting a ton of pucks toward high danger areas. He's fairly creative in the offensive zone and has flash impressive playmaking. While that facet of his game is routinely outshone by his teammate Alphonse Frey, it remains a key strength of his game. And then we'll do one more here. This one comes to us from Jason Bakula of Sportsnet, a mid-sized two-way transitional defenseman, excellent skater with an ability to escape pressure in his defensive zone and lead the rush on his own, average plus defender with adequate pushback physically. Power play quarterback who leans distributor more than shooter. There are times when he needs to identify his options more quickly and move pucks to avoid pressures and turnovers. Not elite offensively, but certainly capable. Could end up more defined as a two-way defenseman who gets to places ahead of his opponents, moves pucks, and joins as an extra layer offensively and provides secondary offense. So again, all these scouting reports, and this is people that break down all these hours upon hours of film and do an awesome job doing what they do. But the consensus seems to be that, once again, this guy is a well-rounded defenseman, not a ton of holes in his game, a couple of things maybe he could do a little bit better, but somebody that should slot in on an NHL team in due time and be a steady contributing player on both ends of the ice. And for me, that's the kind of defenseman that I like. And I just like the Rangers in general taking a defenseman. I'm kind of torn between defenseman or center when it comes to the number 30 overall pick. I know some people will tell you, just take the best player, but when you look at the Ranger pipeline, there's more there when it comes to wingers and less there when it comes to centers and defensemen. And when you look at recent drafts, the Rangers haven't been taking a lot of defensemen. The last 4 drafts combined, the Rangers have taken only 5 defensemen. And the only 2 that were taken before the 5th round were Braden Schneider and Drew Fortescue. You had a couple of 5th rounders, Rasmus Larson and Victor Mancini, and then a 7th rounder, Hank Kempf. So they haven't really been investing in defensemen when it comes to their draft. So maybe it's time to do that, especially in a draft where if you don't take a defenseman with your first round pick, you don't get another shot at it until the 4th round. So again, torn between center and defenseman. I think I'm kind of talking myself into a D-man, though. We'll see. We'll see what the Rangers look to do. Maybe it depends on which is the best player available when it gets to number 30. Is there a center that we like more? Is there a defenseman that we like more? Maybe that's the way the Rangers could look to do it. We shall see. But we can call it there for today. Once again, if you guys would like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, @LO_NY_Rangers. Once again, that's @LO_NY_Rangers. And definitely subscribe to the Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I will see you next time.